Hello, welcome to the Coffee Talkie Show, the podcast for women living abroad. We're so happy to have you here with us today because we have an important topic and it's about boundaries. Like, do we have those? Do we need those? Which one?
How do we put those?
Where
can I get a boundary?
Like, can you buy it in the supermarket? Why do we need them, especially when we move abroad? And yeah, it's such an important topic. So much pain involved in this. So many stories that we have to share with you. And honestly, it's a tool that we need to put in place. Very helpful, especially for us women. We need to be better at setting boundaries. So that's what we want to talk to you about today. So we hope you have your notebook ready, your coffee with you, and
let's begin. So, are you good at putting boundaries?
Better than I used to be. Better than I used to be. And it's really interesting because it's not something that I used to think about that much. But a couple of years ago, I started like paying more attention to those things called boundaries. And I was like, ooh,
yeah,
interesting.
Me too. I feel like I'm still getting better. It's still a work in progress. This is not a strength of mine, but we're working on it. And you know, there's a tendency, I think, to think of boundaries as, you know, those red flags, big things. Like, my boundary is, I don't know, not to post nudity on social media. That's a boundary. It's very far. I'm like not crossing that line, but I'm not even near this line, so that's totally fine. I'm not bothered with this. But actually, there are so many personal boundaries and guidelines that we want to use for ourselves, and for some reason, somehow, this is really, really hard for us to put real boundaries for ourselves, for others, when it's about us.
Yeah. When it's close, when it's relevant, like those daily things. And he talks upon something, so I want to give all of our listeners the information. Boundaries are basically the set of guidelines that we have, okay? Think of it as your own technical manual, the do and don'ts, the better, like, caution information, the read before use, like, kind of things. Those are our guidelines, the things that we need to know how to interact.
Yep.
And who better know them than us?
Yeah, absolutely. And we want to be in control of those because those are first for ourselves. Like, how do I manage these things called me? But then how do others are acting around me?
I was just thinking about, like, how many times is it only me thinking about, like, how many times do you meet people and you're like, I wish you came with a manual. Like, I wish I knew, like, how to interact right now, like what is accepted and what not. Do you have a PDF you can share with me? This would be amazing. Like, I don't know, am I the crazy one thinking those things? Like, maybe it's my dating life making it like sometimes you really want to know, like, how do you operate?
And you know, when you're moving to a new country, there are things, you know, cultural things and things you wish someone gave you just a PDF. Where can I download French PDF? You know, how to deal with French people, Italian people, Spanish people. How do I do that? And what are their boundaries? And how can I keep mine within this space?
What I wanted to mention about this is that wishing to have someone else's manual, boundary, whatever, is good. But then it always makes me question, like, do people know my boundaries? And do I know my boundaries? And that's where, when you asked me in the beginning of this video, how am I with boundaries? My answer is better because it's still a work in progress. There are things that sometimes I'm like, clearly no one knows about this boundary. Maybe I should be clearer.
I think that this is a really great point because it happens to me a lot as well. Like, what's up with everyone? Why do they don't know how to operate around me? And then when you question yourself, and we do it a lot, then you realize that how should they know? I never said that. I was never clear that this is a boundary for me. And I think the most common situation is time, regarding our time. And we both, I think, don't like that people are late when
I say that.
When we have a meeting, you schedule a meeting with someone and someone is late. For us, it's like a boundary. I think, for me at least, for you,
definitely,
I know
yeah.
it as well. But if you never say anything about it, when the person arrives and they're, I don't know, half an hour late, and you're like, oh, that's fine, that's totally, no worries about it.
How would they know that you're offended?
How would they know that you're frustrated about this? They understood from you because you made them understand that this is okay.
Yep.
And so that's the moment to stop and be clear and honest with yourself first. What is the boundary here?
So let's try and break it down to you into 3 things, I think, and help you also understand what is the opportunity. If you're currently moving abroad or if you're living recently in a new place, you have a huge opportunity right now, and we'll touch upon it. But first, let's think about what are those things. So the 3 levels are, first, you need to understand for yourself what are the boundaries, and we'll talk about it, how do you do it. So number 1, what are the boundaries? The second thing is communicating it to others in a clear and simple way. And the third thing is, again, for yourself and for others, what are the consequences if the boundary is crossed? Because there need to be consequences. So those are the 3 levels of setting a new boundary or figuring out your boundary or questioning your boundaries on those 3 levels. So let's try and break it down. First, how do you know? What boundaries do you have?
So sometimes when you feel irritated, angry, and in a certain situation, it's because usually a boundary has been crossed. So most of the time you need to cross the boundary to understand that, ooh,
that's a boundary.
There's a boundary here. So it's being aware of your surrounding, your situations, your behavior, and the way you react to certain situation, and just notice, oh my God, this was a boundary, and someone crossed it, or I crossed it, and okay, so now I know.
So basically it's trial and error, right? If you don't know a boundary yet, as Maayan just said, once you cross the line, you know. So that's one way. Another way would be to consciously just decide some kind of standards for yourself. You don't necessarily need to cross them. You can decide.
Like the nudity part.
Like the nudity part, right? You don't need to try and post nude on Instagram to decide that it's not good for you, right? It's like part of your standards that you can say, like, part of my values, part of my standards, those are boundaries that aren't to be crossed, okay? And actually, it's with regard to you too, okay? So for example, bad talk, okay? Like, I'm not cursing anyone else. So, and that's a boundary. I shouldn't talk to myself in this way as well. So the boundaries with regards to others, but also towards yourself. So one thing is trial and error. The second option to finding boundaries is your standards. Do you have any other example to how do you find your own boundaries?
I think that just by being in a situation. And when you're moving abroad, Gal, you mentioned it before, that's an amazing opportunity to discover those, because everything is new and no one knows you, so you can really try things. I have a great example. It's very, very small. I was looking for an apartment, and there are tons of websites where you put your applications online, and all kinds of systems. Some are paid some not, some for free. So I entered one of the websites and I started putting all my to build my profile. And at some point, one of the requests was a picture. And I'm like, how is this relevant to me getting an apartment or not? And this is a boundary for me. I don't want to be judged for this, like for having an apartment based on my look, me being a woman, my skin color. I don't wanna, that's a boundary for me. I don't wanna do that. So at this moment, I stopped doing my profile, disconnected from the platform, got tons of email. Hey, you left your profile unfinished. I'm like, no, that's a boundary for me. But I had to get there. And there was like a question mark and an exclamation mark. Both. It's like, oh, this is making me feel uncomfortable. So that's a feeling, like, means something is not right. My reaction was, I'm stopping this profile making and I'm not going through with it. So meaning that's a boundary I'm not even willing to cross. Okay?
And when we talked about the opportunity, so we'll elaborate on that for a moment, is the fact that if you're currently living in the same place for many, many years and people know you a certain way, and Maayan gave the example, for example, being late, and you always used to say, that's fine, don't worry, that's fine. And suddenly, out of nowhere, you come and you're like, you know what? Actually, that's not fine. I hate you being late. It makes me crazy.
People don't know.
People don't know how to act to this because it's like, what changed suddenly? Okay? Nothing actually changed. You never liked it, but you didn't communicate it, and we come to the point. When you move to a new place, whether it's a new city, a new environment, a new working space, a new country, you have an amazing opportunity. You can set the boundaries straight away from the very first moment so that it's clear how to act with you. Give your manual, share your PDF. That's how it will be from now on. And then you don't have to deal with what changed, because this was
from the beginning. It's easier. So you can change, and decide to create new boundaries because you realize that you not having a boundary there really is not serving you. So you can decide to create new ones, even, 20 years after you moved abroad. That's totally fine. That's your life. You can do whatever you want.
You might have to do certain things actively when you change a boundary, okay? It might happen that some of your friends will be like, hey, you know what? If this is it, well, it's not gonna work. Fine. Totally fine.
That's a
consequence, okay? We'll talk about it in a second. But you can always change your boundaries. That's totally fine. You just need to understand the consequence. I want to share with you, with regards to life abroad. For example, my social life is really important to me. I love it. I take a lot of care in meeting people, doing things with people. But on the other side, I have boundaries related to how much money I'm willing to invest on social activities. And I would love meeting friends for brunch, but a boundary would be putting 200 euro on a brunch is not acceptable to me. Not because I don't have the money, because as part of my standards, that's not something that I should invest 200 euros on. So if that's all you do, fine. But when I said it very clearly, you know what? I'd love go for a brunch, but this one I'll skip. I'm not putting that money on. We'll meet for another one. It just passed. That simple, because I communicated. So boundaries, super simple if we know them and if we are able to communicate. What other boundaries do you have that might be related to life abroad or life in general?
I have a weird one. It's kind of a weird one. And it's regarding personal space. And so we come from Israel. And
there's no personal space there.
There is no personal space. And now we live in France. And so French people, when they meet each other, it's very common to kiss on the cheeks, twice, 3 times, 4 times, depends on the region in France. But this was weird for me, still is for me. It can happen when you meet a new person, so you've never met before. It's like, oh, nice to meet you. Okay, that's weird for me. So I would do that out of being polite. But, so this is in France, I'm like, totally fine. But in Israel, for example, when someone really touches me and approach too much, I'm like, especially if it's someone I don't know, like a waitress or, in a shop, someone, can I get you some help? And like, first take a step back. I'm really saying it, like, let's take a step back, respect my private space, and then we can talk. Because if you're sitting like this, I don't want to talk to you. And it took me a while. I was feeling really uncomfortable with people, for example, touching me. And usually everyone was touching. I was really, really well during COVID, where there has to be,
2 meters space.
But yeah, so that's I need my personal space, like 1 meter around me. So in France, for example, I would do la bise for being polite, but then I'll take a step back. And that's boundary for me.
Yeah. So those are examples of like how you adjust to a situation. You need to also understand the culture that you're in and how to make yourself comfortable within a situation. You don't need to do everything that the culture is doing, but you need to put yourself in a situation where you're comfortable. And if you're not comfortable, that's clearly a boundary.
Oddly enough, I feel more comfortable hugging someone when I know them.
Yeah.
than giving 2 kisses on the cheeks to a stranger.
But I can tell you that, for example, with real strangers, like sometimes I feel some ask. Like, are we doing the biz or are we shaking hands? Like they will ask.
Yeah.
So they are giving you the possibility to be like, no, actually, I'm not comfortable with it. But that's a really cultural thing. And being late is definitely a boundary. You need to communicate it. So let's talk about the second point of it, and it's communicating your boundaries. And in order to communicate your boundaries, it has to be a very simple sentence. Pitch elevator. You have 10 seconds to say it. You cannot come and tell me an entire story and give me all the differences within the rule. No, give me the rule. What is the guideline?
And usually people don't really care about your whole story and why you don't want them to be late, for example, or why you need your person. They don't care. But you need to make it super clear and simple for them to understand. And you don't have to share too much information. That's where less is more. Give the exact information that you need to give, and that's it. You don't owe them any explanation. That's your boundary, that's your standards, that's your life. You can put the boundary where you want to, and you don't have to explain yourself. Sometimes out of uncomfort, we tend to, blah, 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 and people don't care.
Yeah.
So make it short, simple, and clear.
Very precise. And when you do, and again, it doesn't have to be in a harsh or mean way. You don't use it as like a reason to create an argument or create a fight. You can give the example of being late. That's something I communicate very clearly. Getting better at this. Years ago, I would feel like, oh, I cannot say anything, but I'm just itching myself and be like, and then today I will just say like, hey, that's fine. Today you've been late, but just so you know, that's something that's really irritating me. So please pay attention. I'm not straight away giving like the consequences, but very clearly they will know. But I say it with a smile on my face and being okay with it. Like, I'm not making a drama out of it. It's just like, just so you know, that's something that's very important for me. And another way for me to saying it is like, I manage to come on time. I always manage to come on time. I always say if I'm late for any reason, because sometimes traffic and all that, it happens. So I practice what I preach. I show what I expect to receive as a return. Okay. You cannot be like, hey, my boundary is you never being late, and I show up 30 minutes late. Okay.
And I think one of the hard moments about sharing and communicating our boundaries is, at least for me, is that we're afraid sometimes to hurt the other side and to make them feel uncomfortable. But actually what we're doing is hurting ourselves
and
the other person, because stress is being built, and tension, and it can be solved, in a very simple phrase. Just say what you want, what is not acceptable to you, be nice about it, and you don't have to be afraid of hurting the person around you, because it's not hurting them. And if they are offended, then maybe there's a problem in their relationship, I don't know. But don't hurt yourself trying to protect the other side, and be uncomfortable yourself trying to make them feel comfortable. It's not about being selfish. It's about protecting yourself and your own well-being. And when you do it in a nice way, usually the other side just gets it and protect your boundary. Like, hey, here's my PDF. Now you know.
Now you know.
And I have this story in my head where a friend of mine, she wanted to hire a maid to help her clean the house. And she was talking to this lady, and she said to me, wow, she sounds really, really nice. But her boundaries were, she wanted the apartment to be all arranged before she comes. She's not cleaning windows. She's not cleaning the fridge. She doesn't cook. And she had a whole list of boundaries. And my friend was like, oh my God, I feel like I need to work for her in order to make her feel comfortable working for me. And I'm like, does it suit you, those boundaries that she put? Like, do you want to respect these boundaries, or those boundaries are actually making your life harder? And she said to me, well, she cleans really good and she's really nice, and she wasn't bitchy about all those, but actually my friend decided that those boundaries actually are making her life harder than easier. And she said it's
not serving her.
It's not her. And she said it like very, very nicely to this cleaning lady. She said to her, well, I really respect the way you said it, but it doesn't suit my needs. So I wish you good luck, and we'll go apart. But no hard feeling there, because she wasn't like, okay, I'll come and you clean and I'll look at you, and I'm not doing this, not doing this, not doing this, and you need to pay me 200 euros. It wasn't like that. It was really, really clear, so simple, communicated nicely with a smile, and then you can decide what you want to do with it.
Yeah, I can share it with you very personally. You know this boundary. I have a boundary that no one yells at me. It's that simple. And those who know me know the boundary. But
sometimes you need to cross it to understand.
And sometimes, and I can tell you that in a professional environment, a couple of years ago, I had a situation where this boundary has been crossed. So someone at the office completely yelled at me. It was a very toxic environment. And I went back to my boss. It was only like a couple of months that I worked there, and he asked me like what happened, and I explained to him the situation. And then he looked at me and he was like, actually, girl, get used to it. It happens here at the office quite often. And I looked at him and I was very calm saying this. I was like, listen, I understand that this is part of the culture here, but I will tell it to you very straight. No one yells at me. No one has this right. No one will ever do this again. And if ever it will happen again, you can be sure that I will resign the same day. This was that clear. And I can tell you that it happened again. But the next time it happened, I didn't stand. I literally turned around, let the person continue yelling, and left the room. And when my boss called me and it was like, why did you leave the room? This was not respectful. I was like, remember? No one. If I want to continue working in here, this is not happening. So it was very, very clear about what I accept and what not. So it goes straight to the third part of setting a boundary, is that when you communicate it, you need to know, at least for yourself, and if you can also communicate it to others, what is the consequence of the boundary being crossed. So, someone yell at me, you'll meet a tsunami.
Or someone being late, well, I'm waiting 5-10 minutes and then I leave. Those are the consequences. You should know that. And there's no hard feelings there, but I'm not waiting.
Exactly.
That's it.
Exactly. And now their boundary being met is that you might lose the friendship. It might be the consequences of you setting the boundary and be like, hey, actually, remember what I told you earlier about the 200 euro brunch? I said to myself, might be that I'm going to lose the friendship, but am I willing to lose my comfortness and my standards and boundaries for the friendship? No. So if the consequences will be that I might lose the friendship, I'm willing to take the risk. Okay, so we need to understand what are the consequences of the boundaries that you set.
Yeah, absolutely. And first, for yourself. You need to know for yourself. And like I mentioned before, if you can communicate it and you feel comfortable doing so, do it. That's part of your PDF.
And actually, if you don't have a consequence, it means your boundary is not clear enough. Because if you'll think of it as guidelines, as rules of how to act, we're in a society. You know that if you cross a red light driving, there's a consequence to that. One consequence is the risk you take, and the second consequence is there are laws, right? There are fines, you need to pay something, you might lose points on your driving license, whatever. There are very clear consequences as to if you take this action, what might happen. The same thing has to happen with your own guidelines, okay? And not you don't have to go strike one all crazy, okay? But people need to know how to interact with you. You need to know how to interact with yourself, and you need to know what are the consequences. Because if there's no consequences, you will never work within your boundaries.
Absolutely.
And before we finish today, so those are the three things, just to remind you. You need to know your boundaries. You need to be able to communicate them in a very simple, precise, clear way. And you need to know the consequences of a boundary being crossed. We talked about the opportunity that comes from when moving abroad, and now you have a possibility to set new boundaries that really meet your standards. But before we go, let's talk about what happened when we don't have consequences, when we don't have boundaries, when we just go with the flow, moving to a new place, and how it might look like.
So going with the flow is not a negative thing.
No, it's amazing. I love it.
And there can be, a period of exploring, the new place, the new people, the new traditions, culture, and understanding where you want to put your boundaries. Like, can I put it here or there? It depends sometimes on the surrounding and how you feel in regard. So there can be a trial and error period. Yeah. That's okay. Try it. See what happens if I put my boundary here. What are the consequences? What will happen if I push it a little bit further? How do I feel more comfortable, if the boundary is here or there? Like, that's totally okay to explore.
Yeah.
But if you don't have any boundary and you let basically everyone just do whatever they want in regard to speak to you however they want, act around you however they want, do activities that they want, so you can find yourself really lost, meaningless, unworthy, because like, oh my god, why am I doing all those things and I'm not doing anything that matters to me, that is important to me? Why is no one listening to me? Because you're not speaking up. So, and we say to you, because it happened to us, you know, it happens to me so many times where I'm like, oh my god, I don't understand why I'm doing everything for everyone and no one is doing something for me back. Have I asked? Have I said out loud, not in my head because it doesn't count, have I said out loud that I don't really want to do that right now? Like,
or that I want to do something else.
And if the answer is no, then there are no surprises. People will do what they want to do because they might have standards, they have boundaries, and you don't have any, so you're just going with the flow. You're the easy one, maybe, but actually, if deep inside you feel that this is really frustrating and that you're losing your meaning, yourself, your needs are not met, then you need to put some boundaries and make things clear for yourself. What do you want?
It's your life. That, I think that's really important for you to understand. It's your life. And if it's your life, you need to live by your own rules. You need to know your own manual, your own guidelines, the good and the bad. Boundaries are not necessarily only like things that you do not want. Those can be things you do want. One of the boundaries will be, I want to have me time. I want to have gym time. I want to go to the forest. I want to do things, whatever. You need to know what is the manual. It's your life. And if you don't have a manual, you're basically living someone else's life. And worst thing is that you're living many people's life because you're torn apart between all the other people that are in your life, and it's completely normal, but it's your life. And it's really hard sometimes to set boundaries with the people that are the closest to us, with our parents, with our siblings, with our kids, I guess, with our closest friends, with our boss. But if we don't do that, basically the only person that really gets hurt in the way is us. And we find ourselves without oxygen at the end. So we should not live like that.
Yeah, so try and, start small and where it's easy. Put, small boundaries. See what happens. Explore. That's totally fine. That's the fun part. Just explore. And
pay attention. You'll know. If you don't feel like you have any boundaries right now, pay attention. When are you feeling irritated? Where are you feeling excited? Because it can be a positive guideline, okay? Think about that. Journal about it. Write it on your phone.
Share it with us in the comments. We'd love to hear.
And understand, build your own manual for yourself first, and then communicate it to others and be clear about it. It will make your life so much better.
Yes, and if you found this valuable to you, so please give us a like, a review, comment, subscribe to our channel on every platform that you want. This is your life, remember. So you choose where you want to listen to us, but if you want to listen more, just subscribe.
And we really want to thank you for being part of our community, for showing your support, for being here with us today. It's always a pleasure talking to you, and we'll see you next time. Bye.